Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to our Faith Enrichment Adult Catechism class. Today, we're going to talk about the worshiping church. This will be our last class before Christmas, and then we'll pick up afterwards in January with Deacon Demetrios, who will take the Divine Liturgy, take a closer look at the Divine Liturgy, the different elements of the liturgy, and the development of how we get to what we have today. And it'll be an exciting class or series. Today, we're going to talk about the worshiping church, and it'll give us a greater understanding of the holy space that we worship in. The place where people of God gather to celebrate the bloodless sacrifice, that is, the divine Eucharist, is called the church, in Greek, naos, or ecclesia. So the place of worship, the house of the Lord. Is heaven on earth in which the heavenly God dwells and walks about. Saint Germanos of Constantinople. The first Christian church was the upper room of Zion, where Jesus celebrated the Last Supper. It was there that Christ handed on to his disciples the mystery of the divine Eucharist and spoke to them about God's love. So in the upper room, Zion celebrated the Last Supper, where Christ handed his disciples the mysteries of the Eucharist, the divine Eucharist. It was in the upper room that after Christ's ascension, the Mother of God, together with the apostles, constantly devoted themselves in one accord in prayer and supplication. They constantly devoted themselves one accord. And one accord we should understand as one mind, but also singing hymns together, reading prayers together. The liturgical practice that we have in the church isn't something new, but there were prayers that they recited together. As you read through the New Testament in particular, you'll see verses that are more poetic than other verses, and we can understand them as liturgical prayers that they've committed to memory that they would recite together. Throughout the scripture, you will see elements of that, but also, like especially in John, in the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God, and nothing that was created was not created without God. There's the flow and a cadence in the way some of the readings are written, that it could be understood as part of their liturgical prayer. But in the times of the Holy Apostles, the mystery of the Divine Eucharist was celebrated in Christian homes. After a while, first they were in the temples, they were kicked out of the temples, out of the synagogues, because they were considered heretics according to the Jewish tradition. They've accepted Jesus as the Messiah, and through the Jewish tradition, he was not the Messiah. So they would run him out of the synagogues and the temples, and so they retreat to their homes. Around the 2nd century, so the beginning of the construction of buildings dedicated exclusively to the worship of God. However, when the persecution of Christians began, the catacombs, the subterranean early Christian burial places, became places of daily worship. They were run out of public spaces, so they were run underground. I met a group here in Fort Worth, I may have mentioned this before. Their intent was to create or recreate the 1st century church, so they had regular meetings in members' homes once a week to worship. They sang songs of praise and they did the readings together. They didn't subscribe to any one denomination. They actually wanted to avoid denominations. But as we see, as the church grew up, she went through different growing pains, if you will, from homes until the homes weren't big enough, to buildings solely for worship, until persecution. Then the church was driven underground, where they worshiped in the catacombs, where they buried the martyrs. The catacombs offered the faithful security bestowed by the presence of God. Later, when the Christians could worship the Lord, in freedom, they built beautiful churches everywhere. So around the 4th century, 313, Constantine the Great issued the Edict of Milan, which made Christianity officially recognized and tolerated religion in the Roman Empire. It also granted Christians restoration for all property seized from them during the Diocletian persecution. St. Constantine began the construction of Hagia Sophia onto St. Irene, and it became the Megalo Ecclesia, the great church. And here we have a picture of Hagia Sophia. And this masterpiece, if you will, they built it and they continued to build it for centuries to come. And it withstood earthquakes and fires. But the history is a little bit tragic with the Ottomans. They converted it into a mosque, they converted it into a museum, and they reverted it back to a mosque. Probably a decade ago. Mattel, the toy manufacturer, created Jabba the Hutt's palace, and it looked a lot like Hagia Sophia. And they said this is offensive to Islam and the Muslims because it takes their crown jewel and they made it look like Jabba the Hutt's palace, if you're familiar with Jabba the Hutt from Return of the Jedi. What was offensive was they remembered it as a mosque, and it was originally a Christian church. That's the offense, that they forget the Muslims took the design of the Hagia Sophia as the pattern of their mosques. But Hagia Sophia was our crown jewel of churches, with the dome, with the Pantocrator on top. St. John Chrysostom writes, "The house of God is the school of the spiritual life. The stillness that reigns there moves you to awe and teaches you how to live spiritually. It lifts you up from earth to heaven." So the church is a spiritual harbor where the peace of God reigns. St. Athanasius writes, "So that we turn our gaze towards paradise in imitation of the paradise of Eden, which was planted eastwards. As we sail the sea of life, we are journeying towards the light that knows no evening." A holy church is the sacred space. There the faithful experience the presence of God because God himself dwells there. That is why after a church has been consecrated, we no longer call the church simply a house, but a holy house. And to be consecrated is understood as to be set apart specifically for this one purpose. And this purpose for us is the worship of God. Some may say, where does it say this in the Bible? St. Simeon of Thessaloniki writes, "Because it has been sanctified by the Holy Father through the all-holy Son in the Holy Spirit and is the dwelling place of the Holy Trinity, when we go into church, we enter a heavenly palace. We walk in places radiating the light. Every holy church is a piece of heaven on earth." So when they're questioning why we go to church, why do we have a building dedicated to God in this manner? And oftentimes they say, the church is the people, it's not the space. You know, I get this from Christians of the Western mindset to simply say the church is the people and the building is just the building. They even go further to say the people are just bodies and shells. When they die, their bodies are just empty shells because it's all about the soul. I see this as a poor understanding, and much like the early heresy of Gnosticism, with the strong contrast or conflict between the material world, which is evil and not of God, and the immaterial, which is good and solely from God. They lack or have lost the concept of holiness and sacred space. After all, it's the body that is baptized that the soul benefits. It's the body that receives the Holy Eucharist that the soul benefits. So there's no conflict between the material and the immaterial. Our iconography is also another expression of the incarnation. God takes on our human flesh, becomes man. How can our human flesh be an evil thing? God sanctifies it. But what about how St. Simeon Athanasius and St. John Chrysostom have described the church becomes intuitive to the spiritual experience? And so as we understand the different parts of the church, we come into the church in the first room as the narthex. It's the porch or antechamber to the main part of the church. We call this space the nave. This is where the catechumens used to be instructed and where they stood when attending to the first part of the divine liturgy. The penance as well, those who had committed serious sins and had confessed and repented of them, also used to remain in the narthex, so in that first outer room. In the monastic churches, there's a further area between the narthex and the main part of the church called the laity. Here, the service bearing the same name, laity, is held at all-night vigils. It is also here that the service of Compline, the midnight office, and the ninth hour are read. So in the monasteries, you have the narthex, and then there's kind of like another, a smaller nave, and it's usually broken up with without doors, but with icons, and then the main space of worship, the main nave. When we come into the narthex, um, there's this way of understanding, um, we're shedding the world behind us. It's a room of preparation before we enter into the nave of the church. I am the light of the world. He who follows me will not walk in darkness, but will have the light of life. When we enter the narthex, we are called to leave our troubles of the world outside as we receive the King of all. And we sing this in the cherubic hymn during the great entrance. Let us who represent the angelic host, put aside all the cares of this life, that we may receive the King of all, invisibly escorted by the angels. We light our offering candles as a physical expression of our prayer, of our prayer and our hope. We say prayers for one's personal needs and that of family members or friends. Candles are lit before icons as a sign of one's faith and hope in God's help that is always sent to those who turn to him and his saints with faith and prayers. We venerate and kiss the icons of Jesus, of the Theotokos, of the various saints, to show first and foremost love, reverence, and honor to those depicted in the icons. In practice, when lighting a candle in church, the faithful usually make a monetary offering to the church. By lighting a candle and offering a prayer, one enters into closer contact with church and here ministry to the faithful, invisibly warming the souls by the visible light of the candle. Used to be the faithful would bring candles, bring olive oil, bring bread, bring wheat, bring wine as offerings as well for the benefit of the church, be used by the church for the holy services. Now, few people still do it, and usually on feast days, they'll bring the wine or oil or bake the bread for the services and for memorials. And so, since we're not necessarily bringing these offerings anymore, the church provides the candles, the 7-day candles. The church get the supplies from the monasteries or church supply stores. We buy it in bulk. And so the faithful, instead of bringing candles, they'll make an offering for that. And then also, something we don't talk about much is our own stewardship. It's our tithe to the church to help the administration and the support of the ministries. We don't have a set limit, whether it's 10% or whatever. Each person is to evaluate their own conscience on how they want to participate and support the church and the ministries and the supplies of our church, whether it's the candles, the olive oil, the communion wine, and so forth. We make our offerings. Oh, the last thing I'll say about the candles is during the festival, people would ask with the candles, and I'm like, you're all familiar with this little light of mine. I'm going to let it shine. And they're like, yeah, we know that. I'm like, where did it come from? It came from the church. We light our candles. We're going to let it shine. We're going to hide it under a bushel. No, we're going to let it shine. And in a way, when we light our candles, we're imitating Christ's light in the world. We're being little lights in the world. And it's a symbolic gesture of us being those lights in the world, reflecting Christ's light. As we move from the narthex into the church, the main body of the church, we call this the nave. This is where the faithful stand during the celebration of the holy mysteries and the holy services. Sometimes people ask me about the Western influence on the Orthodox Church, and I'll tell them you're sitting in it. In Romania and Greece and Russia, you won't typically find pews. A lot of times it's going to be standing because that is the traditional posture of prayer is to be standing, especially on Sunday, where we stand in the resurrection, in the glory of Christ's resurrection. Um, Within the Greek Orthodox Church in the United States, we kneel during the consecration on Sunday, um, kind of as an economia, as a divergence of the rule, because we don't necessarily practice daily services anymore here in the US. In Greece, you go to a monastery, they have services every day. In or churches, they have services every day. But we don't have that kind of culture here. And so the Archbishop, I think it was Archbishop Yakovos, said that we should kneel on Sunday during the consecration. That might be the only time we're kneeling in prayer. And so it was kind of an economia, a blessing for us to do that. Otherwise, we would pray, we would kneel during different prayers of different services. But because our culture is different, we do it on Sundays for that purpose. But like if you go to the Russian Orthodox Church or even to monasteries, they on a Sunday they won't kneel during the consecration. Christ is the high priest and the bishop is the living icon of Christ. This is a picture of Metropolitan Isaiah. He's the bishop that ordained me. He's retired now at the monastery, the Holy Transfiguration. No, Holy Archangel, sorry. The right-hand side of the nave is dominated by the throne of Christ, the high priest, and of his living image, the bishop. On the left-hand side is the pulpit, the ambon, which is in earlier times was situated in the center of the nave, from which the deacon reads the gospel. At the eastern end of the church, in front of the holy sanctuary, there is an elevated part called the soleas, which is this spot here. To the right and left of the soleas are the lecterns for the choir and cantors. We have the cantors up here, the chanters, although we have the choir down below. Um, when this church was built, we didn't have the choir on both sides. We actually had the choir upstairs, more of a Western style choir. But over the last couple of years, we brought the choir up front and we try to do the services more antiphonically back and forth, which was more traditional. As you ascend the steps of the solea, takes you to the holy sanctuary, the most sacred part of the church, the iero vima or the ero, meaning the sacred. It is separated from the nave. It is separated by the iconostases, the screen bearing the icons, which in the early church took the form of the simple, uh, like a low banister. It would have like a low banister, but over time it's developed. The iconostasis usually has 3 doors. Let's go back. The iconostasis usually has 3 doors. The central doors, which is the beautiful gate, oftentimes with the Annunciation of the Theotokos, with the Archangel Gabriel and the Theotokos. It is usually only by the clergy during the celebration of the holy services. The other doors would be the deacon doors, which would be on the north and south side of the iconostasis. We actually don't have the deacon doors. Many times the angels would be affixed on, the icons of the angels would be affixed on the doors of the deacon doors. But our design was a little bit different where we have a pass-through rather than the door. Our iconostasis, we have Christ always to the right of the beautiful gate, John the Baptist, and St. George, the great martyr. Additional saints may be added to the iconostasis as you have space. Our church chose St. George in particular, but the first 2 spots of Jesus and John are quite typical in every Orthodox church. And then on the left side of the beautiful gate, we have the icon of Theotokos and Christ Child, the patron saint of the church, St. Demetrios, and then St. Barbara, who is the patron saint of our Philoptikos group, the women's group. And so the space of St. Barbara and additional saints are usually custom to the community that installs the iconography. But always the Theotokos and the patron saint of the church occupy those left 2 spots after the beautiful gate. And then we have the archangels. Like I said, they're usually on the deacon doors, but we don't have the deacon doors. The iconostasis is like a heavenly firmament separating the intelligible from the material, dividing off the holy sanctuary where the sacred mysteries are celebrated from the nave. Now, oftentimes people will say, like, at the crucifixion, the curtain was torn asunder, and it gives us this image that God is no longer separated from us and that everyone can approach. And yet we have closed doors. And well, while it's true, we have the closed doors, we also open the doors to maintain an element of mystery that God hasn't been fully revealed to us. And there are still things we don't understand, that we don't know. And so there's still mystery to this. The holy sanctuary symbolizes heaven itself, where the throne of God stands and is often situated at the eastern end of the church. For those who were here when the bishop was here, during the reading of the epistle and the gospel, the bishop stood on the other side of the altar facing the people, and the priest lined up in order to his right and his left. And we don't have it, but traditionally there would be a synthronon, thrones, usually one in the middle and two lower ones, that you will find in bigger churches, where the bishop, particularly cathedrals, where the bishop would stand, not necessarily here at the bishop's throne, but in the altar area. In the early times, in the back part of the sanctuary behind the holy altar was the synthronon, which consisted of one or more rows of thrones, with a higher one in the middle, known as the cathedra, on high for the bishop. When the height of the iconostasis increased, the synthronon fell into disuse, and the bishop's throne was placed in the nave opposite the throne of the emperor, which was known as the despotikon. The two thrones were uh, aligned into one after the fall of Constantinople. They removed the emperor, right? And in Constantinople, the patriarch became like the governor of the Greeks under the Ottomans. In the center of the holy sanctuary stands the holy table, on which the bloodless sacrifice of the divine liturgy is offered. The holy table is the border between heaven and earth. It is the throne of glory and the dwelling place of God, the workshop of the gifts of the Holy Spirit. It is the paradise of Eden. There welled the spring from which poured forth the physical rivers. From the sacred table, a spring wells up, which waters our souls and raises them up to heaven. Synthrono. Metropolitan Isaiah at the consecration of St. Demetrios, bearing the gifts of the martyred saint relics. The consecration, we did that in 2017. The church is prepared for consecration. It's set apart for this one purpose of worship. If the holy table has been consecrated, relics of the holy martyrs will have been sealed in the center during the consecration service of the church. So we have the altar table. Presently, we have the altar covers, the veils, and then there's a glass on it to protect everything. And then the tabernacle that's in place and the candlesticks. For the consecration, the altar is stripped down to just the altar, and there's a cavity in the middle of it that we remove the altar cover part, and it reveals the cavity in which they pour in beeswax, and they place the relics of the saints. And we also included a scroll of names of all the members of the church to be commemorated into the altar. For the holy martyrs are the foundation of the church, which are built upon the primary foundation stone of Christ the Savior, Saint Simeon. And so what used to be was they built the churches over the remains of the saints, of the martyred saints. Nowadays, we're not building them over the remains. We're including the remains into the altar. If the church, let's say, decides to move, or for whatever reason, maybe the church is destroyed in a fire or something like that, they would um, uh, it's a weird way to say it. There's a service of deconsecrating the church. I mean, desecrating the church. Desecrating always sounds like an intentional inflamement to it. But what they do is there's a service that we read and we remove the relics from the holy altar, and usually those relics will be used elsewhere. And actually, in Houston, at the Manil Museum, they had a replica of a church from Cyprus reconstructed inside the Manil Museum, and it fit inside the building that they had, and they consecrated the altar. The relics and the consecration and some of the iconography that was used in this museum were really on loan. They were purchased off the black market, and we the Manil Foundation contacted the church in Cyprus and said, "Hey, we bought this. You know, we recovered this from the black market, and they contracted that we will restore the icons." So it was the Pantocrator, it was the Platitera, and there may have been other icons. They were stolen out of Cyprus, broken up into little pieces, and then sold on the black market, among other things that are sold. The Manil Foundation collected them, restored them, reassembled them, and they had it for like 20 something years, and then they returned them to Cyprus. This was the northern part of Cyprus that's under Turkish occupation. And part of the contract was at the end of the term, they would return them. But what do you do with this space that's been consecrated? So they had to have a special service where they remove the relics and decommission. I guess that's a better word to say. They decommission the church. I believe the structure of the church that they replicated is still there, but I don't think, I mean, it doesn't have the iconography anymore. I'm not sure what they did. Our relics in the altar, we have relics of Saint Pandelemo, the great martyr and healer. He's an unmercenary. He healed others. He was a doctor. He healed others without pay, so he would do this freely. And we celebrate him July 27. Another relic, we have Saint Barbara, the great martyr, which is also on our iconostasis. We celebrate her Thursday, December 3rd, right? What's today? That's tomorrow. Tomorrow we have liturgy tomorrow. What's that? Huh, okay. This is wrong. It's it's December 4th. It is Thursday. Okay. So we celebrate St. Barbara December 4th. I'll have to correct that. I know something sounded wrong. And then the Holy Fathers martyred at the monastery of Pantokratoros in Dau Pandelis is celebrated Tuesday of Bright Week. So that date changes. And the Holy Fathers, essentially the story with them was they were all martyred during Holy Saturday of Pascha. And two of the monks went to another monastery to chant for them. When they returned Sunday morning, they came back and found that the whole monastery was completely destroyed. The monks were all martyred. They were all killed. And the two monks in particular buried the monks where they laid. So around the whole monastery, wherever they were killed, they buried them on that spot. And the monastery ended up closing down. And it was centuries later that they came to reopen the monastery and dedicate for a women's monastery. And as they were cleaning and like retiling, I believe there was like this odor, a beautiful odor coming up out of the ground, and they removed some of the tiles and they started to find relics of the monastery, of the monks. And then they excavated the whole area, and they were able to collect all these relics from all the monks. And then just to clarify, the relics of the church are often bone fragments that we would insert into the altar. But when we speak of relics, it's not just of bone fragments. Sometimes it's the full body that's uncorrupt. Saint Nectarius was considered an uncorrupt saint. Saint Spiridon, um, Saint Spiridon of Zakynthos was uncorrupt after centuries of being buried. They exhumed his body, and he still maintained flesh. When I went to Greece, to Mount Athos, we stayed at the monastery of Saint Anne, the mother of the Theotokos, and they had her foot enshrined in gold. They had her foot on location, and so parts of the body. Sometimes it's parts of their fragments of their clothing that's been preserved over time. At Vatopedi Monastery of Mount Athos, they had the feast day for the belt of the Theotokos, in which one of her belts, I don't know, is preserved at the monastery, and they do a big procession with the relics. And what they'll do sometimes for visitors, they have this additional cloth that they will bless it by touching it to the actual relic. And so pilgrims can have a relic. It's like a secondary or tertiary, right? Third degree of relic that's come in contact with the actual relic. Um, and then there's oils that we may have received from Saint Demetros, are types of relics that we receive from the saints. And these in particular, the bone fragments are used in the altars, but you'll see them in reliquaries, usually gold or silver containers, uh, decorated with jewels and stuff, that you may venerate the relics of the saints. So these were the three sets of relics that we have from the monastery, St. Barbara and St. Panteleimon. The antimetsion, this is the cloth that's on the altar table. It's a necessary component for the celebration of the divine liturgy. Antimetsion is a way of saying um, uh, it becomes it's the actual table that we celebrate the liturgy on. It's a piece of cloth which has been consecrated during the consecration of the church, which usually is imprinted with an image of Christ's descent from the cross. The antimetsion is laid upon the holy altar during the celebration of the Holy Liturgy. Within the antimetsion, you see Christ being laid down with the Theotokos, Mary Magdalena, James the Apostle, Nicodemus, and Joseph of Arimathea, and some of the other women who were at the crucifixion. It's in the four corners. You'll have the four apostles of the Gospels, and then you see an image of the life of Christ, different elements of his life. And the antimetsion varies a little bit from this design, but the main part will be the burial of Christ, or the descent of Christ from the cross. When we consecrate the altar, we clean the altar, soap and water, and then we anoint the altar with holy chrism. And then the holy chrism is cleaned up off of the altar with antimetsion. The bishop will eventually sign the antimetsion and then distribute it to all the churches of his metropolis. So for a long time, we had an old antimetsion from a different consecration. In 2017, when our church was consecrated, we had the antimetsion like this, bishop's signature for St. Demetrios. But when Metropolitan Constantine is elevated, we all get new antimetsions because we serve the liturgy under the authority of our current Metropolitan Constantine. So it was, I had an experience that I didn't really understand that. He says, shortly you'll get the the new antimetsion that bears his signature. But when he comes, he brings his own antimetsion that has the signature of the patriarch. So it continues to show the hierarchy. The priest serves under the authority of the bishop, and the bishop under the authority of the patriarch. The bishop wouldn't necessarily serve the liturgy under the authority of a different bishop. So Metropolitan Isaiah is no longer the Metropolitan of the Denver metropolis. So Metropolitan Constantine wouldn't use his antimetsion. and then identifies the church of consecration. The Antimission we have now was consecrated at St. Estathios in Houston. It's the chapel attached to the St. Basil Greek Orthodox Church on the west side of Houston. No, the Antimission, the question is, how big is the Antimission? It's probably 2 feet by 2 feet, 24 inches square. Some are a little bit smaller, some are a little bit bigger. We have a medium-sized one, and it folds up to like a little square like this on the altar. So it's always on the altar. After the great entrance, so after the gospel reading, the priest puts the gospel book up and opens the Antimission. I'm going to get our... So folded on the altar with the gospel book on top of it. So if we open the beautiful gate right now, you'll see the gospel book. You won't see the Antimission because it's underneath it. And then we have an altar cover covering the gospel book when we're not in service. We fold the altar cover off to the side. The gospel sits on top. After the reading, sometimes they lay the gospel book flat so it doesn't fall over. I usually have it vertical. It's good for us to still see that it's on the altar, you know. And then we have the Antimission. And after the great entrance, or before the great entrance, we open the Antimission on the altar, and then the chalice and the paten will rest upon this. And so this one here, you know, it has the four evangelists. It has the descent of Christ from the cross. The cross is in the background, and this is placed on the altar. Now, technically, like if the church, I don't know, if the church is closed, no more, the community is no longer here, or there's a fallout between the community and the bishop would come and remove the Antimission from the church. That's the way you remove liturgy from the church. The priest cannot serve or not permitted to serve liturgy without the Antimission. When we go to camp in Colorado or New Mexico, we bring one, and it bears the bishop's name. And that's one of the necessary things for liturgy. Without it, we're not permitted to serve liturgy. And that's the way that the bishop, you know, pulls his authority out of the church. That, and then the priest, he pulls the priest. Some churches, they have a falling out with the bishop, and that's what happens. The bishop, like, all right, fine, pulls the priest, pulls the Antimission, and in a way decommissions the church that way. No priest to serve liturgy, no Antimission for a rogue priest to serve liturgy. But if you have a rogue priest, that's not a good idea either. The priest serves in the place of the bishop. And there's some priests online that are not under a bishop anymore for whatever reason. They leave or they're removed, and they keep presenting themselves as a priest. And some are popular, but like, you got to ask, who's your bishop? And like, oh, I'm in between bishops. Okay. All right. A couple weeks ago, you may have noticed we had a bishop come to the church. I shouldn't record this. Um, we had a bishop come to the church. I got a message in the morning saying a bishop is visiting from uh, Australia. I think it was Australia. And I'm like, where's his papers? He has to have permission to leave his metropolis and enter another metropolis, not a text message. And I'm like, where's your papers? And I was told Metropolitan Constantine knows. I'm like, okay, but I don't know, like proper channels. And so I text Metropolitan Constantine. I'm like, hey, this guy is coming. Is this okay? Like, he says, And he's like, I don't know. I know he's there in Texas. I don't know that he's coming to the church. And I'm like, do I let him in? Do I not let him in? And he said he was just going to stay in the altar. Um, but he's attached to the church in Australia, and he's studying here in Texas, family therapy, family counseling. But the idea is you belong to someone. The priest belongs to a community and belongs under a bishop. And if he has no community and has no bishop, there's question to his canonicity, if he's canonical. I was reading recently, um, the priests are limited to their community, not to be um, addressing other communities in other metropolises. Something with the internet, we have a great big reach now. We could talk to anybody. But historically and practically, we represent the bishop of our metropolis for a community, not for all the communities, unless you've been given that responsibility. Some bishops have vicars, and he sends them to each community. And in some communities or some metropolises, that vicar is the one to hear confession. And the local priest doesn't necessarily hear confession. It's the vicar who comes to hear confession. They're more experienced, they're spiritually um, gifted, whatnot, and they represent the bishop. But um, to be ordained to a community is the appropriate way. No priest at large in between. Um, if if something happens and I get removed, I don't just get removed, I get reassigned. They put me somewhere else unless they remove me from the priesthood. But maybe we don't get along and I need to go somewhere else. They don't just, well, just sit tight. We'll find something for you. I'm assigned here, then I'm assigned somewhere else. There's no clergy at large. That's a lot. Um, but these are displays of the bishop's authority, the antimission and the local clergy. During the consecration of the church, the holy altar is washed and anointed with holy oils, and the antimission is used to rub the oil into the altar and into the antimission. So it is blessed, it is sanctified, um, and this is from our consecration. And then these were distributed throughout the metropolis, but you won't find these in anyone else's metropolis. It was just on the Metropolitan Isaiah. At the north side of the sanctuary is the prothesis table, usually an enclave-shaped area, a little arch into the wall, where the precious gifts, which later are carried solemnly to the holy table during the great entrance, are prepared before the divine liturgy. The service of preparation is called proskymethi. And according to the liturgical symbolism, the holy prothesis, which means preparation, signifies Bethlehem and the cave which Christ was born. That is why the icon of the Nativity is usually depicted in the apse above it. And just as Bethlehem is close to Jerusalem and the holy sepulchre of the Lord, so the holy prothesis is near the holy altar. And so, we have the Nativity on the big wall, but we're also going to commission it to be installed into the prothesis table. And you can see in the picture here, the priest has the prosphoro, the chalice, and the paten, which this is where we prepare the bread and the wine on the paten to be consecrated during the divine liturgy. On the table, the chalice, the paten, the spoon, the cloth, communion cloth, the spear that is used for cutting into the wood, into the prospero, the wine, the water, names of commemoration. We commemorate the living and the dead of the community. And then in the left-hand corner, we have the altar, the coverings for the gifts, the veils, and the aer. The aer is what the priest wears around his shoulders during the great entrance. And there's a little thing, it's called the asterisk. It's a star that sits over the gifts on the paten. And Deacon Dimitri will go further into this during his lesson. But a closer look, you'll see the paten. We have the centerpiece of the bread, which bears the marks of, in Greek, the initials for Jesus Christ conquers. Isus Christos Nikar. That's the main lamb that is used for communion. To the left of it is a triangle which bears the marks of the theta, the Greek letter theta for theos, and the me, the M for the mother, so the mother of God, that little triangle piece, the big triangle piece. And for us, it's on our left-hand side. But when we are preparing it, we say and the mother of God to the right of Christ sits at the right, the queen sits at the right hand of Christ. So it's on the right side of the gift. And then there's 9 triangles on the other side. And those are the different angels and saints, hierarchs, martyrs, unmercenaries, saint of the day that are commemorated during the prothesis service, the proskymidi. And then the fragments at the bottom of the page are, we take a fraction of the bread as we commemorate the living and the dead. So we read a list of all the names of the living, and we take fragments of the bread, and then we read a list of names of all those who reposed, and we put them on the paten. What really touches me with this is on the paten, we have the whole life of Christ and his church represented between Christ, his mother, the angels, and the saints, and then the people of the community. All of that eventually gets transferred into the chalice after the consecration. And so all of it essentially is blessed in the blood of Christ. And we are all individually and collectively represented on that paten. And so the bread and the wine, the chalice, the paten, the spear, the spoon, the asterisk, and the coverings, and then also the communion cloth where the spoon is here. The diaconicon is on the other side, on the south side of the holy sanctuary, is the sacristy, where the sacred vessels are kept and maintained under the deacon's care, hence the name diaconicon. Always have trouble saying that. In which we have the sacristy, holy vessels, additional chalice, patens, fonts, holy oil, and blessing cross. So on our side, we have these underneath the resurrection icon. And oftentimes what you see in the icon in this picture, and what we'll do here, is the icon of the humility of Christ, the bridegroom icon, where Christ is led to his crucifixion. And so we'll have that installed on this side when we have the iconography completed. So on the one side, it's the nativity of Christ, and the other side is the humility, the icon before the crucifixion. All right. I know we just kind of went over everything briefly. On the altar, as you see in this picture here, as I mentioned, we have the gospel book, and it sits on the antimitzion. There's a blessing cross, which you can see it to the right of the gospel book. Behind it, in front of the icon of the crucifixion, is the tabernacle, which holds reserved communion. And that reserved communion is prepared on Holy Thursday before Pascha. That reserved communion is for baptisms and for hospital visits. We keep it there. And then there's a lamp, an oil lamp, or here we have a candle. We have an oil lamp that burns perpetually. It's the unwaning light that we sing on Holy Pascha. And it's a light to represent the presence of Christ, because the presence of Christ is always there in the communion that's in the tabernacle. And then we have the altar candles. Behind it, we have the crucifixion of Christ, and this is a processional icon of the crucifixion that we take out on Holy Thursday. We do a procession around the whole church. The silver discs that you see here, we have them. They represent the six-winged seraphim, where they have the six wings represented, the face of the angel inside. Ours have inscribed in it, Holy, Holy, Holy Lord of Sabaoth. And this is what we receive from Scripture of the angels flying around the altar of God, singing, Holy, Holy, Holy Lord of Sabaoth. And then there's a little gold box to the left of the tabernacle, if you can see that. That's the reliquary, where there will be relics of the saints there. We also use it during Holy Week when we do liturgy for sanctified gifts. When we consecrate the gifts on Sunday, part of that is used for the Wednesday evening liturgy. So it's already consecrated when we do liturgy. It's pre-consecrated. It's already consecrated. And so the liturgy is not the same celebration that we do on Sunday, but it's of a Lenten nature. It's more solemn. The lights are darker. We can do candle lights at that time. And we would keep it in a reliquary like that as well. They call it an artoclasium, something like that, where it holds the bread that is used for Holy Communion for later that week. So on Palm Sunday in particular, we consecrate the gifts, but we need a, additional pieces for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday liturgies. So our friends sent a chat message to all of our group saying, don't forget to cut the extra pieces out, because you don't want to finish Palm Sunday and not be prepared for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday services. You need pre-consecrated bread. And that's generally what's on the altar, and what's in the altar space. All right. Any?
Father,
Yes.
would you be willing to show the picture of the fathers reaching to the middle of the table? It's right before the proscomidi.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Um,
That one
uh,
there.
yeah, that one there. Do you recognize Hayden Habe, now priest father? I can't
Father
remember
John
his name.
Habe.
Father John, yeah. That is so cool to know that he was part of that.
Father
And we
John, who is facing us in this picture here, he was a member of this community. He was
yes,
parish council president one time.
I don't remember that for
He
sure,
was
but
on parish council at least. And
yeah,
he is now semi-retired, serving at the St. Basil Church in Houston. He served for a while at St. Nicholas in Corpus Christi. Um, Father Mark also is facing us. He's the taller one. He visits us every now and then. He's here as a med student. And
so Hayden went from Corpus Christi to where?
to Houston.
And when you say part time,
He's retired, but he's still working.
oh,
That's what we
I
do.
didn't, I didn't think he was that old.
Nah, he's not that old, but he's old enough to retire. Um,
Okay.
my little joke is, when we retire, we just take retirement, but we keep working.
Yeah, I noticed that. Right.
And I'll laugh. The priest with his back to us with the ponytail is not me. and I thought that was me.
Yeah, it sure
I'm
looks like you.
I'm on the other side of Metropolitan Isaiah with a
Oh, with the beard edge
yep,
showing in front of your ear.
with a clean cut.
Yeah, the
It
clean
was a
cut.
long time ago.
Ah,
Not that long, but
well, thanks for sharing these pictures. We didn't get to see this close to the altar
no, no,
when we
yeah. And
saw the
then
consecration.
placing it in the altar. I mean, that was just it was awesome to see. Actually,
And that
our
the
altar, the cavity was so big. I didn't know what to expect. They said have a reliquary for the relics. I said okay. So I have a good, I don't know, 2 by 4 size reliquary. And Metropolitan Isaiah is like, that's too big. I'm like, okay, I don't know what else I have. He gave me what he brought him with. So we used that. It was a smaller disc-like reliquary. And then he opened the space and he's like, that space is too big. Um, you would need like a gallon of wax to fill it up. And my friend Carl, he's a contractor. I'm like, Carl, I need help. I need a box by this measurement tonight because I need it tomorrow, first thing in the morning. And we built a box that fit right into that hole and cut that space right in half. It was still
perfect.
big. It was still a big space. We didn't use all the
And,
wax. We should have used all the wax. But
and
it's go ahead, Lydia.
the deacon, what's his name
Deacon
with the
Paul,
holding the is he still serving?
he's still serving. He was working for IOCC, International Orthodox Christian Charities. I think he's still working with them. But
Right.
he's working out of Denver. He lives in Denver. But he
Right.
was
And he used
the
to
archdeacon for the bishop for a long time.
right, and wherever Metropolitan Isaiah came, we usually saw Deacon Paul. So,
Yeah.
yes.
Deacon Paul, like now there's Deacon Alexios, but Deacon Paul was like, none of us know what to do with the bishop. And he's like, go here, then go there, and pick this up, put that down. He knew all the inside stuff. With
Yes.
Metropolitan Isaiah, he didn't come regularly. I mean, he's, 95, 96 years old now. He
Wow.
wasn't traveling as much as Metropolitan Constantine. Plus, we have like the greatest geographical area to cover for 50 parishes. And so he doesn't get to go all the time. So we don't see him all the time. So we don't know what it's like to be with him regularly. And there's always this intimidation like, oh, the bishop's coming. I don't know what to do because I never have the bishop. But Metropolitan Constantine's been coming pretty regularly where he tells me, relax, don't be anxious. I'm like, I'm good now. As long as the deacon is here, I know what to do. And I know you're not going to bark at me or chew my head off. We're good. We're good. Not that Metropolitan Isaiah ever barked. Um, my first service with Metropolitan Isaiah is the ordination, and they move you around. They literally grab you by the elbows, like you saw, and they move you around. And then I got to serve with him first time as a priest at the Holy St. Paraskevi Monastery. It was their feast day. And two things he told me. I was wearing the red vestments that we're wearing this Sunday, and he reaches into my ear and he's like, "Nice vestments." I'm like, "Thank you." He's like, "They'll be great for Valentine's Day." I'm like, "Okay, okay." And then he told me, they only do Greek here at the monastery. I said, "Yes, Your Eminence, I know." And he's like, "So if you get stuck, fake it." Yes, I will do that. And the other priests were able to, whatever I'd failed to do, they did it right without missing a beat. So like I read part of the ekphonisis, part of the prayer. I didn't do the whole thing. I don't know why. And they just came in like they knew I was gonna mess it up. But Metropolitan Isaiah never like yelled at me or anything. He always made it comfortable for us. But we just didn't know what to do with him. And the deacons were always, "Oh, I'm glad you came." because you can tell us what to do.
Yes. Yes.
All right. Any questions generally about the church, about the different spaces, the different things that we use in the services? Say what? Okay. Let me get back here. I see some messages saying, I can't hear you. And that was an hour ago, but they hear me now. And let's not name priests. um, and okay, so Isaiah was asking, why do the priests take communion in two parts? Historically, that's the way it was offered. The priest received the body, consumes the body of Christ, and then receives the chalice, receives the blood of Christ. And now that we have Deacon Dimitri, you see it even more, right? Because I'll take the first part, and then I call the deacon. He receives the body. He goes around the altar. I commune the chalice, and then he communes the chalice. And then what's offered to the people is the body is put into the chalice, and we receive it by the spoon. This developed over time for a number of reasons. One reason was people would receive the body and they wouldn't consume it. They would take it home. They would venerate it and worship it at home. And it was a um, misuse of communion. You're supposed to receive it. And it became like an idol. You know, it's the body of Christ, so it's God, right? But it became a material thing that people were worshiping. And then also it could be carelessly handled. You know, you put it in your pocket, or like we keep the cloth under your chin to prevent any spilling or dropping of anything. And if we drop it, we don't just like, oh, we'll pick it up later. Like we get it. You know, it's the body and blood of Christ. We don't want to step on it. We don't want to put it into the floor. In some places, they have carpeted floors on the solea, and if you can't get the communion out, they burn it out. So you see little burn holes in the rug. Um, it's easier with us with the marble. You don't have to do that. And um, I would use like the communion cloth and then, sip it out of the communion cloth and then wash the communion cloth appropriately. So people were misusing Holy Communion. They weren't consuming it at all. They would give it to other people when they're not supposed to give it to other people. Even if like, oh, I'm going to take it home to mom because she's sick. It's not appropriate for you to take it. Take it. You send the priest or the deacon, and they will bring it because they're the proper distributors of Holy Communion. In the Catholic tradition, two things. They have Eucharistic ministers, so non-ordained people distributing communion. And it's a practicality purpose, right? To have more help to do it. But the Orthodox, like, no, the bishop, the priest, or the deacon distributes communion. And the other thing that they do is they the adoration of the host, which I'm not very familiar with that, but there's it's like a prayer service. Does it sound right? There's a prayer service, and the host is on the altar, and it's for our adoration, whatever that might mean to the individual person. Um, for us, that's like, no, you're supposed to consume gifts. You're supposed to consume the communion. Don't worship it. Don't adore it. Commune with Christ that way. And so, for some of these purposes, they put the chalice. They put the host in the chalice, and then by the spoon, it became practical use. We take the andidoro right afterwards. In the Russian tradition, they drink a little bit more wine, and it's a way of making sure it's all consumed properly. Like you don't get communion stuck in your teeth, that sort of thing, right? I mean, I'm a little crass about that, but um, you consume it all and then you wash it down to make sure it's all down. Um, Now the Catholics will still do it in two parts. Western Rite probably still do it that way. The Lutheran Church, I was raised in the Lutheran Church. They will either put the host on your tongue, the the wafer, or you can dip it into the chalice, or you can put it on your tongue and then drink from the chalice. Um, I guess that's their accommodation of those who don't like drinking from the same thing. Um, it's common practice now in the Orthodox community. Everything's put in the chalice and then it's distributed by the spoon, the common spoon. And I know my mother-in-law is like, common spoon? Nope. But it's the body and blood of Jesus Christ. Um, Gold and silver are not, I guess, what do they call them? They don't spread disease like other materials would. I forget what that's called. And it's the body and blood of Christ. So the real question is, when you're approaching, do you approach with faith or do you approach with, I'm going to get sick? Ooh, the same spoon. And I always tell them, I consume everything at the end. So my advice for you, for the women in particular, but men too, with chapstick, wipe your lips clean because you don't want to leave that on the spoon. Sometimes you'll see me clean the spoon because there's lipstick on the spoon. That's not consecrated. That's different. Uh, Antimicrobial. Is that it's a nice word. Antimicrobial. That's the gold and the silver. Um, it is common practice in the Antiochian tradition, and I'm starting to see it a lot more in the Greek tradition since COVID, where they just open their mouths and I turn the spoon over. The Greek bishops generally don't like that. I'm not going to make a thing of it. Um, I learn who's going to keep their mouths open and I'll just turn the spoon. But if you're going to close your mouth on the spoon, don't open. There's a sweet spot on how you open your mouth. If you open it too wide, it looks like you're not going to close your mouth. So I'm going to turn it over and then you're going to close your mouth on the turn spoon. And then I'm going to get your teeth and it'll be weird. But if you don't open your mouth wide enough, sometimes communion is a big piece on it, and it makes a mess on your lips and your teeth. And so I'll tell you, open your mouth wider. Like the little kids. Oh, technical word, bacteriostatic. I got doctors. John, you're a doctor, is that right? Yes. See, I got doctors. um, am I making this stuff up, John? With the gold and the silver? Not at all. All right. And so I prefer everyone to close their mouths, but some people, whatever, they're gonna keep their mouths open, even if they come from Antiochian backgrounds. Like I can spot those guys. They're Antiochians. And I'll turn the spoon over. I think St. John's, Father Vasily will tell you, close your mouth. And maybe um, when Deacon Alexios was here, he said, don't let them keep their mouths open. But is there a reason for it, for closing your mouth? Because keeping your mouth open gives the idea that what are you keeping your mouth open for? Because I don't want to touch the spoon. Why don't you want to touch the spoon? Because it was in someone else's mouth. Like, I get it. Uh, if you're sick, stay at home, right? If your kids have snot coming out of their face, keep them at home. I'll come to them and we'll keep everything clean. And it's just nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to see it. And then you're all, making a mess in your pew. That's where you're going to get sick, sneezing on someone next to you. uh, all right. But so generally close, I tell that like the kids like medicine. You take it like because it's medicine. It's medicine for our soul. And some parents try to force the little kids to do it. And I've seen like I don't yell usually. I don't yell. But one mom like squeezing their cheeks to open their mouth. I'm like, stop that. Because you're associating pain now to communion. And so when the kid comes up, he's already afraid my cheeks are going to get squished. And then I have to taste the nasty communion. I'm like, let's make this a nice um, environment,
Experience.
a nice experience, right? And then also, we're too polite. I think we're too, what do they call it? Too polite. Ladies first. Well, I would say the men should lead their women, right? The men is supposed to be the head of the household, lead the women. And then we'll bring our kids and we'll make the kids receive communion first. I'm like, parents as lead as an example, teach your kids to receive communion. And then take communion. I have plenty of parents who bring their kids up and the kids struggle to receive communion. And then we fight. And then I go to give mom communion and she's like, I'm not prepared today. I'm like, well, this is partly why the kid doesn't want to receive communion. Mom and dad aren't receiving communion. I'm like, lead by example. And so men spiritually are the head of the family, should lead, wives should follow, and then show the children. But uh, we're too polite, and I'm not gonna rearrange
Is
you.
there, I'm
Sabrina, yes,
sorry.
you're okay.
Is there a time where a woman should not get communion?
Ah, is there a
Is what
time
I
when a
mean?
woman should not get communion? So there is a time when a person should not get communion, is when they have unconfessed sins that they know they should confess, right? Second is if their whole body is anxious and crabby and grumpy and hateful, not just women, men do that too. Um, and if you got like resentment towards others, so what the Greek yayas will say, if a woman's menstruating, she shouldn't receive communion. And it's not just because of the blood issue or the issue of blood, haha, in every which way I could mean that. Um, there's a whole body chemistry that's out of whack during the menstruation, right? I mean, that's why we're like, oh, you're PMSing. Um, but men PMS too, not the same way, but we get cranky, we get grumpy, we get agitated. That's not the way you should approach for Holy Communion. Come peacefully. Um, if you got this whatever going on inside you, uh, very punny, Father. Punny, my puns.
Thank you, Father.
But so generally, so it's not just a women's issue. It's a how you approach. Um, and sometimes you might need communion despite all that. But the yayayologies, the theology of the yaya, of the grandma. Part of the part of the menstruation from the Jewish tradition is it's an uncleanliness of body because you're menstruating. And then the yayology builds upon that. When you receive communion and you're menstruating, you menstruate out the communion. I'm like, what? No, that's not a real thing. But you tell yaya, yes, yaya. And then do what you got to do. The yayology is, you don't cross your legs in church. And what's the yayology part of that? It's like you're closed off to the Holy Spirit by crossing your legs. And I'm like, it's the posture of crossing your legs is relaxed. It's, you're sitting back, you're relaxed, you're just chilling. And what do we constantly say throughout the liturgy? Let us attend, let us be attentive. And there's this idea that, you know, historically, traditionally, you wouldn't even be sitting down to cross your legs, right? You would be standing. But if you are sitting down, you should be sitting in a position where you can easily stand up, be ready to attend like a soldier. Um, and like I can always spot the visitors. There's a difference between guests and visitors and inquirers. I would say a visitor is someone who for the first time came to the church, doesn't really know why I'm here, and they sit with their arms on the back of the pew. They're very relaxed and like they're not serious about the church. They don't really care to know anything about it. Someone dragged them along with them, maybe. Um, the guest is someone who is following, someone that already comes. And the inquirer is the one that comes for the first time and it's like, what is all this? And I can't get enough of it. But, you'll see every now and then someone sitting in the back with their arms, they're lounged in the pew. And I'm like, sit up, sit up. So it's just too casual. Yes, Alex. Wait, not taking communion, what? Unconfessed sins. So if there's something like really bothering you, unconfessed sin, you should come to confession first. If it's if it's not on your mind at all, like it doesn't bother you, I I'd say like that's a lower degree, right? But if it's bothering you, and if you're coming to the chalice, like, I don't know if I should come to the chalice. And people do this. I don't know if I should come to the chalice. I'm like, then you shouldn't, right? But if it's something I did last week and I don't even remember it and it doesn't bother me, you know, probably not the criteria. But I mean, obviously, plan to schedule confession, but you're not approaching thinking about this sin, then come forward for communion, I would say. But if you're coming to communion and the sin is like on the forefront of your mind, you should probably go do confession and we'll go do confession. Would I rather you approach to receive a blessing if you're not receiving communion? So, I don't know yet. This is new for us and for me, with everyone coming for a blessing. Um, and it's causing congestion. Parish council said, Father Nick, it didn't get easier with having Deacon Dimitri. And so what I'm thinking, and I need to find out for sure if I could do this, there are after the after the after the gospel reading, we do two prayers of the faithful, and then we get ready for the great entrance. Before the two prayers of the faithful, there's a prayer of the catechumen. What I think I might do, I need to ask, is have all the catechumens come forward and we could do the prayer over you and then return you to your pews and continue with the service. What we'll learn in the liturgy class is the liturgy was designed with two sections. I mean, we still do it this way, but the first section is the liturgy of the faithful, the liturgy of the word, which leads up to the gospel, which was available for everyone. And then there was the petitions of the catechumens, and the catechumens were then they would leave. Let all catechumens depart, let no catechumens remain. They would leave. I don't know if they go to the narthex. I joke and say they get the coffee ready. Go get the coffee ready. And then the second part of the liturgy is the liturgy of the faithful, which is for those who are receiving communion. So those who were not receiving communion would leave at that point, or depart to the narthex. And then just those who were receiving communion would stay for communion. But the prayers of the catechumen, I'm thinking it might be time to bring those back and have the formal prayer. But we don't do things like that on our own. So I'll ask and see how we
That
can better.
seems like the way the OCA does it, and it is very flowing with the service.
The OCA, I don't think they ever removed the prayers of the catechumen. And for us, I understand it the way I understand it was in a country of Greece, and now it's 1,000 years into it. Everyone was Orthodox, and then they baptized their children. So there was no catechumens because they're all Orthodox and they're all baptized since they're children. And so it would fall out of practice because it was unnecessary. And then even here in the US, for the first 50 years, we didn't have many converts because it was all in Greek. And unless you're the rare couple that married a Greek person, or you're the Greek one that married a Xeni or a white person, I don't know how much you came to church anyway. And so they wouldn't need the prayers of the catechumens because there wasn't very much conversion. But now it's becoming it's relevant again. It's relevant. So we'll figure that out. And it's kind of how the church naturally evolved. It would start off locally until the need became enough that it became official. It starts grassroots. I like that within the church. Like, how do we know someone's a saint? The community knew long before the bishop knew. We declared them a saint. If you knew this person, you knew that was a saint. And afterwards, more communities come to learn who this person is. And then it's brought up to the attention of the bishops. Cody. Mhm. I'm not sure what the question is. Okay. So kind of the question is how I understand it, like with the mass conversions of the barbaric people, Cyril Methodius was um, teaching them orthodoxy, and um, the the catechumens, they do service like not liturgical service, works. They do works. I don't see a problem with that. Um, we got people already rolling up their sleeves and baking food at the Greek festival, so that's good stuff. In situations like that where it's a whole community that's becoming Orthodox, they're going to go through a period of time of catechumenate, and like mission parishes, right? Still today, Well, they're all catechumens, but they all have work to do within the community, setting up the chairs and set up and tear down, stuff like that, the meals, um, different orders. I don't know about orders, but I maybe we're just using different terms like, this ministry does fellowship hour, this ministry does visitation. They'll visit you in the hospital and stuff like that. As catechumens, they can still do it, but I mean, they don't handle the communion, the sacrament, and that would be reserved for the priest or the deacon. And in the turn of the 20th century, we had communities that were already Orthodox. The whole community moved here. They were without priests. They would minister to each other as they could, but they wait for the priest to come to baptize all the children. And so he would come and do all the kids. And then all the people waiting to get married, let's get you married. It was like mass sacrament, as it was necessary, because there was one priest for the whole East Coast or something like that, and they would do it that way. But for the lay ministry and the catechumen ministry, I think it would still function the same way. They get the blessing from the priest or the bishop to do what they're doing. That's different from what I was suggesting about grassroots. But they have to get the work done, right? And so in Stephenville, we have people coming that were now Orthodox, and these were the main community of the Stephenville mission. And so they get blessed to do the work that they need to do. So they're chanting before they were Orthodox, because we needed chanters, right? The priest could do it all. He's not supposed to do it all. And so you start teaching them as catechumens to chant and to sing in the choir, parish council, stuff like that, as necessary, I guess. There's a question: is there a time when you had to refuse someone communion? Does that happen? It's a delicate situation. If I know someone has been removed from communion, excommunicated, and they haven't received the blessing to receive communion again, I would try to tell them politely, let's fix that thing first before we continue. Otherwise, it might be like, if I don't know they've been excommunicated, I mean, I can't do anything about that. If I find out later, I would have a talk with them and say, hey, we need to do confession to correct the impediment. So through confession, you get penance. I mean, I never really call it penance. There's just things we do to get right with God, right? And it may be pray more, it may be go serve at a soup kitchen, give charity, stuff like that. But sometimes if there's a confessed sin, but it's not repentant, so it's an ongoing, adultery is always the easy one to go to. I'm in an adulterous relationship. I confess that. And I would ask, is the relationship over? And they're like, well, we got some unfinished business. I'm like, well, finish your business and then come back and confess, and then we'll return you to the chalice. So, we speak of being excommunicated. It's not a permanent state of membership. There's an impediment that's preventing me from receiving the sacraments. So I'm out of sacramental standing because of the impediment. For instance, the adultery. For instance, getting married in a Protestant church. I didn't get married in the Orthodox church yet. This is when everyone's already Orthodox. If what we do in common practice today, an Orthodox person is marrying a Protestant or a Catholic, you have to get married first there and then get your marriage blessed in the Orthodox church. If you do it reverse, you excommunicate yourself because it's the last church of the sacrament. Well, I did it in the Catholic church. Well, then go be Catholic. But if we're going to do both churches, you do the Catholic church first and then the Orthodox church. It puts you back in proper standing. So technically, you're out of standing after you get married in the other church because you shouldn't receive the sacrament in the other church. But then you get your marriage blessed and you normalize your marriage in the Orthodox Church. You got back right again. So you corrected the impediment of being married outside of the church. When people say I've been excommunicated, it's not unfair to say, what did you do or what are you doing? And like, why is it something I did? I'm like, because we don't go around and say you're excommunicated because I don't like the way you look. Like there's got to be a reason to why you're removed from the chalice. And it's usually um, something like that. Uh, and we're going to get you, John. He wants to get his marriage blessed in the church, and we're going to do it. We're going to do it. Um, there's a reason why you're excommunicated, and it's not something we did. It's something you did, but it's something that could be corrected, right? Stop cheating on your spouse. That's a good start. Let's do that, and then we can receive you at the chalice. Normalize your marriage in the church. Oh, we went to Vegas and we got hitched at with Elvis, and well, great. Now you need to have your marriage blessed in the church. Well, I'm not ready to do that yet. Okay, then let me know when you're ready, and then we'll receive communion again. It's like there are some leniency. Father, we're working to get um, um, technically divorce in the church if it's not ecclesiastically divorced. But if you're in the process of working on getting your marriage um, ecclesiastically divorced in the church, you would start with confession and then you begin the process of ecclesiastical divorce. And then it's an economia, it's a divergence of the rule to keep you in good standing. But like the divorce needs to be confessed. If you just divorce and did it all on your own, that's a problem. And if you get divorced without the ecclesiastical divorce, you did it all on your own, it prevents you from getting married in the church. You're not free to marry yet until you get the ecclesiastical divorce. And so I've been told by Metropolitan Isaiah, don't schedule any marriages until the ecclesiastical divorce is complete because they may not get it complete. And, oh, my wedding date is next week. You didn't get your ecclesiastical divorce. You're not free to get married in the church. But these are all things that we work on to correct. And then those who are not Orthodox, they usually don't know the secret handshake. And I'll ask him, are you Orthodox? And they're like, I'm like, okay, I'll give you a blessing and go get the bread. And they're like, okay. But sometimes they come up and they don't know and I don't know. And they sneak through. And then I'm like, don't do that. But we try not to deny anyone communion. All right. Anything else? A little over. When you come for communion and you do open your mouth and you want that, we call it the bird feeder, just so you know that's what we're teasing you. We got the bird feeders today. It's like, the mother bird feeds the baby bird. Don't say amen till after you receive communion, because that throws off the timing. I'm getting ready to give you communion, and you say amen, and then your mouth is closed. That causes a mess. Give space to the person in front of you. The Greeks are terrible about that. They stand right on your heels, and then you receive communion, you back up, and they're right there. Do your cross when you're waiting for communion. As you're approaching communion, there's a hazard of hitting the chalice, and we don't want to do that. or do it after you receive communion, after you say Amen. But the servant of God, and they say their name, and I say receives the precious body and blood, and they say Amen. I'm like, I'm not done. There's a whole thing that I say. And then they close their mouth as I'm I'm like, no, open your mouth. Either way, people like to be pious and they bow, but I can't get to you. So hold your head up. So if you hold your head up like this, I'm going to think you want me to turn it over. So keep your head straight, open your mouth, and I'll go right in and give you communion. But if you don't open your mouth or your head is down, I can't get you. If you're holding children, hold them in your right arm so I can give communion that way. Because if they're in the left arm, I got to go around. I'll tell you, next arm next time. Trying to remember, I never held my kid in my left arm. It was my right arm. I don't know. We'll say the servant of God, and if I wait, then you say your name. Yeah. If you say what, we're gonna look at you. What? And I get that. I'm like, the only thing you should say is your name. I'm not asking a foreign question. I'm not asking like, what'd you have for breakfast? You shouldn't have breakfast.
Do
The
you say
servant
your
of
name?
God. What's that?
Do we say our name when we approach you?
Until I get it. Definitely for Deacon Dimitri. I don't think he's been paying attention all this time. He's not here, so I could tease him. So he doesn't know the names like I do, but he'll get them. And especially if you're visiting a church and you don't know the priest or the deacon, say your name. And like I said, they'll all say the servant of God, and then you would say your name. If they know your name, they'll just say the servant of God, David. But if I wait, the servant of God, and if you know to say your name, I'll give it to you. The Usually the priest will repeat the name. You shut up and you take it. The question is, what if I say the wrong name? No, I'm just kidding. Correct me. I've had some people say, Father, you've been saying my name wrong for the last 2 years. Why'd you let me go so long? Obviously, I think this is your name. And I'm like, I got your name. And until it's corrected, I don't catch it because I get in that pattern. I get in that groove. And there's been a few people like, you've been calling me the wrong name. I'm like, then say something. Say it before I start. Um,
Father, my name is Sabrina.
Sabrina. Yeah, but I'm going to call you Fotini. Is that right? Or what did we decide? Fotini
Olivia
Nicole.
Nicole.
What is it?
Olivia Nicole.
Olivia Nicole. See, I get it. Does it matter if your name or your baptismal name? You should use your baptismal name. So if you have your given name, I mean, you get away with it. But you got a different name. What's your name? Anthony. That'll screw me up. But and that's fine. I'll just forget Isaiah. Some people take their baptismal name and that becomes their name at church in particular, like Nectarios. Nectarios. He's a Nectarios. His name is Chris. But I can never find him in my phone because he's recorded as Chris. I'm like, where's Nectarios? And so I got to search for him by his last name, Key. Some people take it as their name in church. I like that. It's not necessary. But at communion and in church, I will probably forget your other name and just call you by your baptismal name. Kevin, Ryan, who chants, I'll call him and say, hi, Ryan. But in church, I can't call him Ryan. It's always Kevin. I had a priest use the wrong baptismal name for me about 10 years because it was close to it. And what is your baptismal name? Are you talking about me?
No, it's not you. It said people call me Anna,
And it's
but it's
just Ann.
Anastasia.
Oh, it's Anastasia.
Yes, but everybody calls me Anna, and I don't know why.
Well,
Even when I
because you're
correct them, so
Ann.
I just give up sometimes. So yeah.
Okay, well, so
Uh,
Ann and Anastasia, you can see.
Is it like the
Stretch.
worst thing though if they say Anna instead of Anastasia?
No, no, just,
It's close.
just tell them Anastasia.
Yeah, eventually
And they'll
I
be
did.
like, okay.
Yeah, and they were just like you said. Sorry, but that was my fault. And I said, that's my fault, Father, because I didn't correct you.
Ha ha. And those are the corrections we like. Don't stop us during the sermon and say, Father, that's wrong. Save that for afterwards. Um, anything else? Communion. When your time comes for baptism, I'll tell you this, we'll, wear whatever you're going to wear to the church, have a bathing suit and like an oversized white t-shirt to go over. If we're baptizing you, we want to have a big font for that and you'll get completely wet. You'll need 2 bath towels because one is not enough for adults after a baptism. I'm learning. Um, we'll get dressed. We'll put on a new clean white shirt or blouse. You don't need white pants, but if you got them, wear them. But you would have like a white outfit afterwards, representing the new soul from baptism, the clean soul from baptism. You won't put your shoes back on right away because when we do the Holy Chrism, we'll anoint your face, your hands, your neck, your back, and your feet. And so it's easier if your shoes are already off. We'll cut some of your hair as a tonsuring, and you'll get your cross and receive communion for the first time through baptism and chrismation. If you're just being chrismated, you would take your socks and shoes off. We're going to anoint your head, your hands, and your feet, and your neck and your back. We'll cut your hair too. But it's not a real haircut. It's just I cut some hairs. All right. Well, I'll let you go.
Am I going to have a bald spot?
You're not going to have a bald spot unless you already had one.
God.
It'll be good. It'll be good.